Hartman. I am a tech writer and editor at Google. I own our Developer Docs editorial style guide, and in recent discussions with writers, it has become clear to me that different people have different ideas about what an editorial style guide is and what it's for. So I'd like to talk about that today. Someone I know recently wrote about the need to write fast when you're writing documentation for internal use within a company. And they said something like this, I'm paraphrasing here: don't use a style guide. Just agree on a set of standards with your team and be consistent. And as some of you are noting, I had to smile at that because from my perspective, here's what a style guide is. It's an agreed upon set of standards that's written down so you can be consistent over time. So yes, I think it's great to agree on standards and to be consistent. From my point of view, that is a style guide. I think that a lot of writers tend to think of a style guide as being the unalterable word from on high, mandating the inflexible rules. And some writers have had bad experiences with rigidly enforced rules laid down by the style police who stand in the way of your getting anything useful done. But if you think of a style guide as a tool that's there to help you, and if you think of the editors or reviewers as people who can give you feedback, going back to that last talk, to help you make your document the best it can be, then we can avoid this whole style police paradigm. So here are some of the main reasons to have an editorial style guide. First, documenting decisions so you don't have to remake them. Then consistency, both within a doc set and across doc sets. And providing an authoritative source of information. So I'll go through those in a little more detail. First, documenting style decisions. Every style guideline is one more decision that you don't have to remake. For example, in the olden days, every time I wrote the phrase developer's guide, I needed to decide all over again what phrasing and punctuation to use, whether to put an S at the end, where to put the apostrophe, all of that. Then the group got together and made a decision, and I wrote that decision down in the style guide, and from that day to this, we've never had to make that decision again. The second reason, consistency, is closely related to the first one. These days, if I can't remember what decision we made about the phrase developer's guide, I can go look it up in our style guide. Not only does that let me be consistent throughout my own document, it helps me be consistent with what all the other writers are doing. And it also makes things easier on readers who don't have to guess whether two different phrases mean the same thing. It makes things easier on translators who can use the same phrase, translate the same phrase repeatedly. And it makes things easier for maintainability because you can do search and replace if you have that sort of a setup. The last of those 3 points, authoritativeness. There have been times when I've been editing a document and I've asked a writer, for example, to change lowercase id in a phrase like user ID to a capital ID. And if the writer thinks that's just me being high-handed and arbitrary, then it's possible they're going to push back. If I include a link with that comment to a part of the style guide where we say, you know, ID should be capitalized, then they're more likely to recognize that it's not just me being arbitrary. It's an arbitrary decision that we made a while ago as a group, and so it's official. Let's see. Did that go on to the next one? Right. So the question frequently comes up: what happens if I disagree with a style guide? And I think that it's important to recognize that a style guide is a living document. It changes over time. If you have concerns about your style guide, then discuss them with the style guide owners. In some cases, you might even be able to become a style guide owner yourself. And the owners may decide to change the style, or they may give you good reasons why it should stay as it is. I'll close by mentioning an upcoming project. We at Google have been using our developer doc style guide for about 12 years now, but it's only been visible to internal writers. So we will be making it publicly available soon. One of our style guidelines is never try to document the future. So I shouldn't actually say it will be, but we hope it will be available soon. It's for use by any open source projects that want to use it, and I should make clear that this is not the one and only official Google style guide for everything. It's just for developer docs, and we're not trying to make a new industry standard or compete with other style guides that are out there. We're just making it available for open source projects that want to use it. Because I'm talking about style guides, I feel like before I close, I should mention what I like to call Hartman's law of prescriptivist retaliation. Any article or statement about correct grammar, punctuation, or spelling is bound to contain at least one error. So if you saw any mistakes that I made, please be gentle. I'll close with this line from Orwell, which I think is a good principle to keep in mind whenever you're using a style guide. Break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. Thank you. Oh, and
hey, everybody. Isn't this conference awesome? Come on. Yes, yes. I'm going to talk a bit about meetups. That's also awesome. That's also awesome. We're going to have an unconference session about this at the top of the hour. And as Eric told you, we have 24 meetups on 4 continents. That's a long way from 4 years ago where we had 2 meetups that were fledgling. We're collaborative. We're collaborative. We're more than just writers. Sorry about that. We're programmers. We're tech writers. We're developer advocates. We're customer support engineers. We even have a few people from marketing here. Yeah, I know. I've even seen a program manager or 2. And one thing I want to do is recognize every meetup leader who is here. They've gone the extra mile to help the Write the Docs community, to bring the spirit of Write the Docs all year to various places around the world. So when I call your name and location, I'd appreciate it if you could stand up and stay standing. And for the rest of you, hold your applause until the end. I know there are a couple of meetup leaders here from Europe. I hope Kristof is here. And yep. Oh, okay, he's next, and also Sam Wright from Berlin. And our focus is for meetups in North America. Margaret, I know you're in the crowd somewhere. Margaret Eaker. Becky Todd, I know couldn't make it. Monica Campbell leads our meetups in Boise. Phil Borstein and Rose Williams lead our meetup in Boston. In Boulder and Denver, we have Mary Beth Alexander and Bree Hilmer. In Houston, we have, I learned how to pronounce this yesterday, I think, Michele Cerf, Emily Zanitz, and Jennifer Platt. Ricardo Feliciano has revived the meetups in the Big Apple, and he's doing double duty. He started a meetup in Philadelphia as well. From Ottawa, I know Tina couldn't make it, but we have Tina Klein-Walsh and Matt Butler, who will be speaking at the end of the day. In Seattle, we have 2 new meetup leaders up there, Lois Patterson and Becky Hughes. In San Francisco, we have a gang of 4, Juan Lara, Laura Stewart, Nico Bokolan, I hope I got that right, and Sarah Day. And here in Portland, we have myself, Bo Nishiyama, and Sam McGann. So, let's give them a
All right. Hi, everybody. So my name is Joe Lodin. I'm the Technical Docs Manager for Cisco Meraki in San Francisco. I want to give you a lightning-fast overview of the ways that you can find value in documentation as part of a support org. To give you some background on what I do, the documentation that I manage is not part of the product team. It's not a product-owned resource. It's part of the support team. So I report to support management. This also means that when we define the value of our documentation, we have to be focusing on the value of the support org. We have to make sure our mission lines up with them and all of that stuff. So there are some unique challenges in doing that, and I want to overview some of the different ways that we found that value. So the main business cases for documentation and support, I think the most common one, and certainly the main one we had when I joined the role, is case deflection. How do you deflect cases using documentation? We found that for our org, that is incredibly difficult to nail down. That is incredibly difficult to iterate on and see how well it's doing, so we had to seek value in some other areas. And I started drawing attention to how you can use docs to improve support's efficiency, and going hand in hand with that, support education, your onboarding docs. But for the sake of simplicity, we're gonna say those are the same thing. So if you want to deflect cases effectively, you have to answer some very, very difficult questions, including, what is the customer doing before they reach out to support? Okay, how are they interfacing with your product? What were they trying to do? Has the customer read any articles, and if so, which ones? We want to know if those articles are helping that customer. Did they read the articles, say, this isn't for me, this isn't answering my question, and then move on? And then, assuming all else fails and the customer had to reach out to support, what did they actually need from that support interaction? What did we give them through that support interaction that could be put into the docs? So, we have a lot of difficulty answering these questions. These are not easy questions to answer unless maybe customers interface with your product, your case interface, and your documentation all in the same UI platform. You can have some fancy analytics that'll give you a lot of this info, or maybe you just have to rely on customer sat surveys. So, as a result, we had to look at some other value metrics, including improving support efficiency. Some of the questions we have to ask here, again, we need to know what the customer needs from support, but thankfully we have case data for that. Which of those cases are pain points? Which cases require the most effort on support's part, the most time, the most emails, phone time, all of that stuff? How does support actually use your documentation? Are they reading docs for a flowchart of how to help the customer? Are they reading docs for, to send to the customer to do support basically on their behalf? How are they actually interfacing with your docs? And then we have to understand that not every case can be solved with documentation. There are outliers. You need to understand what those cases are so that you can set your scope effectively. You need to understand that's out of your hands. You have to focus on these other things. So that's kind of a brief overview of the questions that we've had to answer, some of the issues we've run into, and maybe some of the information that you want to gather as a support org to better utilize your docs and improve and iterate on that. Again, I know that was lightning fast. I don't currently have an unconference scheduled, but if this is a topic that's of interest, please hit me up, find me. I'd be more than happy to lead a session either later this afternoon or tomorrow if you want to hear that. Otherwise, you can find my email here, LinkedIn here. You can use my fairly unprofessional Twitter at JHLodin if you want. Anyway, thanks everybody.
Hello everyone, my name is Paul Anzel. I'm not a documentarian, I'm a data scientist, but I'm somebody who's had to deal with enough ill-documented code packages. I'm like, okay, let's do better. And so I'm here to hang out with you all today. Like most ex-academics, my approach to try and learn about this sort of thing is to say, all right, what sort of research is out there? So, go to Google Scholar, plug in software documentation, see what I find. Not promising. Pretty much what you're gonna see is a lot of surveys of people saying, documentation's out of date, it's obsolete, it's incomplete, and I don't know if I can necessarily trust it. Graph here, you can say people are saying, I rarely expect documentation to follow stuff. So, yeah. But the problem, I think, gets worse than that. There isn't very much specific research on software or technical documentation. If I'm trying to say, hey, I have a Friday afternoon, I need to write documentation for this API, where should I spend my effort? Should I write a tutorial? Should I provide documentation? Is Agile or something else better for creating documentation? Nobody's really tested this. So, I realize this is kind of what I sound like right now, and I don't want to give that impression. I'll also be honest, my side of the office, we have a lot to answer to as well. One of my favorite authors in the tech industry is this fellow named Greg Wilson, who's basically said, it's not computer science right now, it's computer, I've had 2 beers, let me tell you my opinion. He wrote this book, Making Software, where he tried to actually compile the state of the research as it is and help get it out there. But for one example, there was this work by Andres Stefik in University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where he was looking at how beginners learn programming languages. As a case control, he designed a language called Randomo, where they randomly generated the syntax. Then they had beginners learn Randomo as well as other programming languages and saw the sorts of errors they got. What they found, C-style languages like Java and Perl were as hard for beginners as this randomly designed language. The programming community, professionals that they are, took this with the appropriate measure. But my point is not to scold. My point is to say I think we have a lot of opportunity to do some science here. If you have coder friends who are willing to run some experiments with you, I think there's some real opportunity here. Run experiments, collect data, and then please share your results. There is a lot of educational psychology you can draw on, and maybe I'll come back next year and actually get through some of this. But a very good overview to this is this book, How Learning Works by Ambrose. They have hundreds of citations to the literature. And be skeptical about what you see. A lot of people make grand pronouncements on very small samples, stuff that would fall under error bars, or they're like, this is statistically significant. Okay, but you're saying we have to spend twice as much money for a 2% improvement. There's also a real hierarchy of evidence. I think case studies, as we all have them, are very important. But I'd like to see us move towards surveys, randomized control trials, and then, God willing, we can get enough of those together to build a meta-analysis and really get a good idea of the state of the industry. One final thought. This is not for documentation, but this was for science popularization. In the 1960s, there was a newspaper strike in New York, where a number of newspapers, or a number of writers, continuing to write articles, but they didn't publish. This included science articles for the New York Times, and Phillips et al. Basically said, okay, well, let's see, this is a natural case control study. Let's look at the difference in citation rates between these things that were written up and the ones that were actually published. And they found that if scientific results were published, that translated into an over 70% improvement in citation rates. So this is by analogy, but I think this is the sort of data we can take to our managers and say, this is why what we do is important. But I'd really like us to do this even more. I'd really like us to be very methodical in what we see and show the evidence that tells us why we believe what we believe. Thank you very much for your time.
Who here has heard about API to Docs? That's a lot. That's good. So if you haven't heard of it yet, API to Docs is a set of micro conferences that we started about API documentation and all the things around it, because a lot of you are looking for this kind of information. It all got started last year in the London meetup group when Rosalie Marshall from GDS, the Government Digital Services, came to one of our meetups and asked, like, hey, we're working on this developer portal thing, and we need more information. Like, could we maybe do an event? I was like, yeah, sure, that's awesome. So we did a whole day event. It was a great success. Like, we had a good turnout. People were really happy. So it was a lot of fun. And as it happens to be, that's also what our company does. We even have it in our logo, developer portals. So we're like, let's do a lot of these, and let's do them all over the world and get everybody excited and get everybody to think about developer documentation and developer portals. But this is where a little hiccup happened because I think most of you are working somewhere, but few of you are here really as like your company trying to help the community. And this is kind of weird. And in a community where we originally started, the Drupal community, this is kind of normal. A lot of small consultancies are really part of the community and trying to help the community to grow and to go forward, and are actively helping the project. And so that's like our consultancy. We're 30 people, and this is really part of who we are, and it's very important for us. And we wanted to make that clear. So yesterday, on the Writers' Day, I sat down with a couple of people to think about like a sort of code of conduct for businesses and like a way to say like, you know, we come in peace. It's all good. Yeah, but what does that mean for API to docs? So I sat down, I talked with a bunch of people, including Eric and Margaret and Tom Johnson, and we came like, this is what I distilled from all of that. So first of all, API to docs is an open franchise, meaning if you run a meetup or if you just want to do one of these and you know a location and you would like to, you know, help advance the knowledge, the shared knowledge and the science about API documentation, then you're free to do so. Everybody's free to do so as long as you follow a couple of rules. The most important of those rules is that the events should be member-centric. It's not about your company. It's not about you making money. This is about sharing knowledge and helping people to learn about API documentation. So we try to remove all kinds of barriers. So for example, I try to do the events for free. We don't do things like captive audience abuse or other salesy stuff, or nothing too obvious. Just, you know, be nice. Yeah, so if that's pulled your attention and you're interested in joining us, go to api2docs.org. We're still looking for speakers. There's a few days left. Well, actually, just submit today if you can. Our first event will be in London on the 20th of June. There's also some pre-registration going on. We're probably going to run them through the meetup groups, but you know, we'll see. Whatever is the easiest and the least work. But we would love to have you there. If you're interested in API documentation and you don't want to wait until API to docs, then come along after these downstairs, because in Lola's room, we'll do an unconference session about API documentation and developer portals. And if somebody asks me, I'll even show you our open source project that we're working on, but only if you ask me. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Troy Howard. Some of you may know me already. I do Tech Docs at Twitter, and I was one of the founders of this conference. One of the goals for this conference was to change the developer culture around documentation, and that's also sort of my driving force at Twitter. I'm trying to change the culture of our engineers to be more product-oriented and focus on documentation as part of a larger product that includes code and docs and tests and things like that. So we are a very metrics and data-driven company. The way that we measure our success at the things that we do is by finding a way to measure it and then seeing how it changes over time and then patting ourselves on the back when we meet our goals. One of the problems, though, is it's very hard to measure culture, and it's very hard to measure success in changing culture. So I dreamt up a whole bunch of different metrics, like how can I measure this? One of the ways that we came up with that everybody thought was okay was measuring commits to docs versus commits to code inside of our Git repos. So do people commit to Markdown files and RST files, or do they commit to, you know, Java files and Python files? And then how much? And how much does that change over time? Are we making it better? Are we getting more docs written? So we have a little tool internally that we use to measure that, and it's very specific to our stuff and not very useful to anybody else because of that. I want to change that, and I want to share that with the rest of you. So we are open sourcing that piece, and we're calling it the Code Words Project. The name, thank you, Nick Blanchett, if you're out there. He came up with that name. Basically, what this thing will do is it'll go out and it'll look at open source repos, and it will figure out how many docs commits there were, how many code commits there were, create a ratio, and then it'll come up with an industry baseline for what is normal. Because we don't actually know if we're normal or not at Twitter. We don't know if we're doing a good job or a bad job compared to the rest of the world. We only know if we're getting better internally. So we want to understand that contextually for everybody. So we're going to analyze a whole bunch of open source stuff. We're going to publish the results. And we would like you to contribute to that, both in terms of helping us code up the technology behind it, as well as running the tool on your internal repos and sharing the results publicly. There would be no private information, just numbers ratios, things like that. So if that sounds cool to you, go check out codewordsspelledweird.org and come talk to me around 2:40 downstairs. I've got an uncomp session scheduled. So thank you very much.